Hello students, welcome to the lecture on cardiovascular and respiratory health, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Understand cardiovascular system, explain respiratory system, describe cardiovascular risk and prevention, discuss respiratory risk and prevention. Let's start with the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system is the simplest form, a system that consists of a pump, pipes and a fluid system. The system is a closed circuit which is elastic, thereby allowing movements and stresses to occur without damaging it. The pump in this system, or the heart, simply allows the blood to flow in. It does not pull the fluid in, therefore the only function of the heart is as a pump. As a consequence of the passive filling of the heart, the network of arteries, capillaries and veins throughout the body regulates the rate of circulation of the blood. While this flow to the heart is constant, the actual pumping of the blood is intermittent, allowing a small fraction of time for the heart to stop and rest between pumps.
Hi, this is the cardiovascular system. I have a question for you. Go ahead. What is the cardiovascular system? The cardiovascular system includes the heart and the blood vessels. The heart pumps blood and the blood vessels deliver it throughout the body. At the center of the cardiovascular system is the heart. It is a muscle about the size of your fist. It's located behind your rib cage and a little to the left of the middle of your chest. The ribs protect your heart. That is why whenever you fall down or get hit in the chest, your heart is safe. Your heart pumps the blood through the body, through arteries and veins. These are like little roads in your body. The blood carries the good, nice oxygen and nutrients that the body needs and carries away the rotten, dirty carbon dioxide and chemical waste so that the body can get rid of them. You have reached the heart.
Yeah, Mr. Heart. Can you please tell me more about yourself?
Sure, let me give it to my operator. The heart is divided into the right half and the left half. These two halves of the heart act as separate pumps. Each is in charge of pumping blood through one of the two blood vessel circuits. The heart has 4 chambers: the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium and the left ventricle. The atrium on both the sides of the heart receives incoming blood first, and then it sends the blood down to the ventricles to be pumped out. The right side of your heart receives oxygen-poor blood from the body and pumps it into the lungs to get rid of the carbon dioxide and pick up the good oxygen. The left side of your heart receives oxygen-rich blood from the lungs and pumps it back into your body. The heart depends on 4 valves to move the blood in your heart in the right direction. The sound your heart makes, duck, 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 comes from the sound of these valves opening and closing. Blood pressure is the measurement of the force of the blood as it flows through the arteries of the cardiovascular system. The top number is called the systolic pressure, and it is the pressure found in the arteries while the heart muscles are squeezing blood out of the heart. The bottom number is the diastolic pressure, which is the pressure of the blood as it continues to flow through the arteries between the heartbeats. Your heart is the most important organ in your body. You could not live without a heart. And that is why you need to take care of your heart and keep it really, really healthy. These are the main things that you can do to keep your heart healthy. Eat healthy foods, exercise every day, and live life tobacco-free.
Cardiac output is the amount of blood ejected per minute by the heart. This is closely related to the maximum VO2 which we measured in the previous lab. In general, the higher the maximum cardiac output, the higher the person's VO2. Maximum cardiac output for a physically fit male is about 30 L/minute. Consequently, men who are not physically fit tend to have a maximum cardiac output of about 20 to 25 L/minute. In women, the maximum cardiac output is similar but tends to be higher when performing work at the same level of oxygen consumption. This is speculated to be due to the lower levels of hemoglobin that exist in women, therefore reducing the amount of oxygen that a woman's blood can carry.
The heart is a pump which must circulate blood through two different but interconnected vascular systems. The smaller of these systems is the pulmonary system. Blood returning from the upper part of the body is delivered to the right atrium of the heart by the superior vena cava, one of the body's two largest veins, while blood returning from the lower part of the body is delivered to the right atrium by the other major vein, the inferior vena cava. Contraction of the right atrium in each cardiac cycle forces blood into the right ventricle. This is followed by contraction of the right ventricle, which pumps blood into the pulmonary artery, sending it on through the blood vessels of the lungs. As the right ventricle contracts and pressure within the right ventricle rises, the tricuspid valve situated at the opening between the right atrium and right ventricle shuts, preventing any backflow. The pressure generated by contraction of the right ventricle soon opens the pulmonary valve and blood enters the circulation of the lungs. After passing through the circulation of the lungs, the blood, having been recharged with oxygen and having rid itself of carbon dioxide, is returned through the pulmonary veins to the left atrium. The left atrium, too, contracts, forwarding blood into the left ventricle in order to fill it before it contracts. As the powerful left ventricle contracts, the mitral valve shuts, preventing backflow into the left atrium. The aortic valve opens and blood is forced into the aorta, which distributes it to the rest of the body apart from the lungs. As the contraction comes to an end and pressure in the aorta falls, the aortic valve snaps shut to prevent backflow into the left ventricle.
The heart is a pump, a four-chambered duplex pump. Functionally, the heart can be considered as two separate pumps. Right side, smaller half of the heart receives returning blood from all parts of the body, pumps blood to the lungs for aeration by way of the pulmonary circulation. Left side, larger half of the heart receives oxygenated blood from the lungs, responsible for pumping blood to the rest of the body. Valves. The atrioventricular valves in the heart provide for a one-way passage of blood from the right atrium to the right ventricle and from the left atrium to the left ventricle. Semilunar valves just outside the heart prevent blood from flowing back into the heart between contractions. A surge of blood enters the aorta with each contraction of the left ventricle. The peripheral vessels do not permit blood to exit the arterial system as rapidly as it is ejected from the heart. A portion of the blood pumped from the heart is stored in the aorta. This creates pressures within the entire arterial system and causes a pressure wave to travel down the aorta to the remote branches of the arterial tree. This stress and subsequent recoil of the arterial wall during cardiac cycle and can be felt readily as a characteristic pulse in any superficial artery of the blood. In healthy individuals, the pulse rate and heart rate are identical. The cardiovascular system includes the heart and two networks of blood vessels: pulmonary circulation, which moves deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs and returns oxygenated blood back to the heart, and systematic circulation, which carries oxygenated blood from the heart to the body's tissues and returns oxygenated, depleted blood back to the heart. Blood is that sticky red fluid which circulates throughout the body in a complex network of veins and arteries, transporting nutrients and oxygen to the body's tissues and removing waste products for disposal. The heart's contraction works to move oxygen into the blood. It also gathers carbon dioxide from the blood so it can be expelled through the lungs. While the lungs play an important role in this process, each of the body's cells is involved. The cardiovascular system includes organs which take up space throughout the body, including the heart and all of the body's veins, arteries and capillaries. The cardiovascular system is basic to life, and the beat of one's heart is an automatic function which is controlled by the brain. The cardiovascular system includes the heart and two networks of blood vessels: pulmonary circulation, which moves deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs and returns oxygenated blood back to the heart, and systematic circulation, which carries oxygenated blood from the heart to the body's tissues and returns oxygenated. Blood is that sticky red fluid which circulates throughout the body in a complex network of veins and arteries, transporting nutrients and oxygen to the body's tissues and removing waste products for disposal. The heart's contractions work to move oxygen into the blood. It also gathers carbon dioxide from the blood so it can be expelled through the lungs. While the lungs play an important role in this process, each of the body's cells is involved. The cardiovascular system includes organs which take up space throughout the body, including the heart and all of the body's veins, arteries and capillaries. The cardiovascular system is basic to life, and the beat of one's heart is an automatic function which is controlled by the brain. The cardiovascular system of the head and neck includes the arteries which supply oxygenated blood of the brain and to the other organs of the head, including the mouth and eyes, and the veins which return deoxygenated blood from these organs to the heart. There are a number of very important blood vessels within the head and the neck. These include the brachiocephalic artery vein, the external and internal carotid arteries, the jugular vein and the retromandibular vein. The cardiovascular system of the lower extremities is the system which provides oxygenated blood to and removes deoxygenated blood from a person's legs, feet and toes. Deoxygenated blood is moved from the digital vein in the toes up to the dorsal metatarsal vein in the foot, to the posterior tibial vein and the small saphenous vein. Both are located in the calf. The blood is then transported through the thigh via the great saphenous vein to the femoral vein. From there it moves through the body to the heart and lungs. With the carbon dioxide in the blood is replaced with oxygen, the freshly oxygenated blood then returns through the legs via the corresponding arteries, which move in paths parallel to the veins. The cardiovascular system of the lower abdomen and pelvis is made up of the liver and a large number of blood vessels which come from networks in the stomach, intestine, pancreas and spleen. The veins of the lower abdomen's cardiovascular system carry blood from these organs through a portal vein to the liver. There, the blood enters capillary like hepatic sinusoids. Altogether, these are called the hepatic portal system. After passing through the portal veins of the liver, the blood is carried through a series of merging vessels into the hepatic veins. These empty into the inferior vena cava and return the blood into circulation. The corresponding arteries of the same names are taken oxygenated blood to these sites in paths parallel to those of the veins. The cardiovascular system of the upper abdomen and chest includes a number of major cardiovascular organs and blood vessels. These structures are critical to the process of moving deoxygenated blood to the lungs, where carbon dioxide is removed from the blood and replaced with oxygen, and then circulating the oxygenated blood throughout the body's tissues and organs. The primary structures of the cardiovascular system of the upper abdomen and chest are the heart, which pumps blood throughout the body, and the heart's primary structures and blood vessels, including the aorta and the superior and inferior vena cava. There are also a large number of important blood vessels which serve the major organs of the upper abdomen, including the splenic vein, the abdominal aorta, and the hepatic veins. If all the vessels of this network in your body were laid end to end, they would extend for about 60,000 miles, more than 96,500 kilometers, which is far enough to circle the planet Earth more than twice. The one-way circulatory system carries blood to all parts of your body. This process of blood flow within your body is called circulation. Arteries carry oxygen-rich blood away from your heart, and veins carry oxygen-poor blood back to your heart. In pulmonary circulation, though the roles are switched, it is the pulmonary artery that brings oxygen-poor blood into your lungs and the pulmonary vein that brings oxygen-rich blood back to your heart. The vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood are colored red, and the vessels that carry oxygen-poor blood are colored blue. 20 major arteries make a path through your tissues where they branch into smaller vessels called arterioles. Arterioles further branch into capillaries, the true deliverers of oxygen and nutrients to your cells. Most capillaries are thinner than a hair. In fact, many are so tiny only one blood cell can move through them at a time. Once the capillaries deliver oxygen and nutrients and pick up carbon dioxide and other waste, they move the blood back through wider vessels called venules. Venules eventually join to form veins, which deliver the blood back to your heart to pick up oxygen. Your heart is located between your lungs, in the middle of your chest, behind and slightly to the left or your breastbone, sternum. A double-layered membrane called the pericardium surrounds your heart like a sac. The outer layer of the pericardium surrounds the roots of your heart's major blood vessels and is attached by ligaments to your spinal column, diaphragm, and other parts of your body. The inner layer of the pericardium is attached to the heart muscle. A coating of fluid separates the two layers of membrane, letting the heart move as it beats, yet still be attached to your body. Your heart has 4 chambers. The upper chambers are called the left and right atria, and the lower chambers are called the left and the right ventricles. A wall of muscle called the spectrum separates the left and right atria and the left and right ventricles. The left ventricle is the largest and strongest chamber in your heart. The left ventricle's chamber walls are only about a ½ inch thick, but they have enough force to push blood through the aortic valve and into your body. The respiratory system includes nostrils, external nares. Holes of the nose are called nostril. Nostril stands for either of 2 external openings of the nose. This is where the air is inhaled from your nose. Nasal cavities. 2 nasal cavities are separated from each other by a thin cartilaginous median vertical partition called nasal spectrum. 3 bony ridges, the superior, middle, and inferior nasal conchae, arise from the wall of each nasal cavity. Nasal conchae increase the surface area of the nasal cavities. Internal nares. These are the posterior openings of the nasal cavities that lead into the nasopharynx. Pharynx, as it has already been described in the digestive system, it comprises nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. The pharynx provides passage to both air and food, part of the digestive system that comes down to larynx and continues with esophagus, common channel for swallowing and respiration. The food and air pathways cross each other. Larynx, voice box. Until puberty, there is little difference in the size of the larynx in man and woman. Thereafter, it grows larger and becomes prominent in man. Therefore, it is called Adam's apple in man. Human larynx consists of the following structures. Glottis. The pharynx opens into the larynx by a slit-like aperture. The glottis. Cartilages of the larynx. There are 9 pieces of cartilages. 3 are single and 3 are paired. Larynx is an organ that connects the lower part of the pharynx with the trachea. Nasal cavity. Nasal cavity and nose is in charge of breathing in respiratory system. When air is inhaled, the nasal cavity is divided into right and left passageway. The tissue covers the wall of nasal cavity that contains blood vessels and help warm the air inhaled. It makes moisture in the nose and air to not get nose bleeds. Trachea, windpipe. The trachea is a tube that connects to the larynx, lungs as well as the bronchus and bronchiole. It carries air towards parts of the respiratory system that it works with. It has C-shaped rings of cartilage to prevent the trachea from collapsing during inhaling.
In order to stay alive, the body has to breathe air. We breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. This process is known as respiration. Breathing happens automatically. Every day, the body breathes about 20,000 times. By the time we reach 70 years old, that's about 600 million breaths. All of this breathing occurs because of the respiratory system, which includes the nose, throat, voice box, windpipe and lungs. At the top of the respiratory system, the nostrils bring air into the nose, where it's filtered, warmed and moistened. Tiny hairs called cilia protect the nasal passageways and other parts of the respiratory tract and filter out dust and other particles that enter the nose through the breathed air. Air can also be breathed in through the mouth. The two airways of the nose and mouth meet up at the pharynx, which is located at the back of the throat. The pharynx carries both food and air and is used for digestion and respiration. One path is for food. This is called the esophagus, which leads on to the stomach. The other side is for air. It's called the trachea. A small flap of tissue, called the epiglottis, covers the air-only passage when we swallow. This stops food and liquid from going into the lungs. The larynx, or voice box, is located at the top of the trachea, the air-only pipe. This is where our vocal cords are. The trachea, or windpipe, which is a 2 to 3 centimetre tube, then extends downwards from the bottom of the larynx for about 12 centimetres. The walls of the windpipe are made strong by stiff rings of cartilage that keep it open. The trachea is also lined with tiny hairs. They sweep foreign particles and fluids out of the airway, keeping them from entering the lungs. The windpipe divides into 2 branches, and each one of these enters one of the 2 lungs of the body. Each branch resembles the limbs of a tree, dividing into smaller, finer branches called bronchioles. The bronchioles end in tiny air sacs called alveoli, which look a bit like grapes. These structures enable fresh air to get to the air sacs, which are surrounded by tiny blood vessels or capillaries. The oxygen passes through these air sacs and travels through the capillary walls into the bloodstream. At the same time, carbon dioxide transfers from the bloodstream into the air sacs, where it gets breathed out of the body. When we exercise, the body needs more oxygen to feed the muscles as they work harder. The body responds by breathing more quickly and deeply. As the cells of the muscles use up more oxygen, the lungs have to work harder to keep up the supply. The respiratory system then speeds up to supply the body with much needed oxygen, and also to get rid of the carbon dioxide waste in the system. Over time, exercising also helps our chest cavity to get bigger, which enables the body to increase the amount of air it takes in. More capillaries form around the air sacs, so the body gets better at swapping oxygen and carbon dioxide gases. We can see how the body's respiratory system helps the body to move about and is influenced by regular and ongoing physical activity.
Lung. The lung is an organ that functions for us to live. It takes oxygen from breath taken and removes carbon dioxide. The oxygen enters the lung's main pipe, the trachea, which supplies to right and left lung. When the lung expands, the air pressure inside the lung drops, thus inhaling air from the outside. This is because the air must go to the low pressure zone, which is in the lungs. The lung also functions as a defense against infection. The nose is first thing against inhaling harmful particles, then the lungs. Pleura. Pleura is a thin membrane that surrounds the lung. The parietal pleura conceals the chest cavity and the visceral pleura covers up the lungs. The visceral pleura are when the parietal pleura folds back at the root of the lung. They protect the lungs from surrounding areas of the body and harmful particles. Pleura are made out of two layers and fluid that take up space between two layers. The two pleurae are always in contact, but when air and liquid between the two pleurae are collected, the pleural cavity will become apparent. So both in left and right there are two pleural cavities. Pleural effusion happens when the blood cannot pump the fluid away from the lungs, which can cause shortness of breaths.
The respiratory system moves air through the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, and bronchus to the alveoli where the gas exchange between oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs. Nares are the openings to the nose. The nasal cavity is lined with cilia, mucous membranes, and blood capillaries. The air is filtered by cilia, moistened by mucous membranes, and warmed by the blood. Air moves into the pharynx or throat, the common passageway for food and air. Air continues on to the larynx. The epiglottis, a flap of tissue in front of the larynx, closes off the larynx when swallowing to prevent food from entering. The larynx or voice box contains the vocal folds. The trachea or windpipe connects the larynx to the bronchial tree. The cartilage rings of the trachea prevent the trachea from collapsing. Lungs are spongy tissue with alveoli and blood capillaries. Breathing occurs because of the expansion and contraction of the lungs. The bronchi carrying the air subdivide into smaller branches called bronchioles. At the end of each bronchiole are the alveolar sacs. The alveolar sacs are surrounded by blood capillaries and contain millions of single-layer alveoli cells where the gas exchange takes place. Oxygenated air goes from the nose to the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchus, and alveoli. By the process of diffusion, oxygen in the air moves from the alveoli to the capillaries. Carbon dioxide moves from the capillaries to the alveoli and is exhaled. This process is called respiration.
So why would you do this to your lungs? Love your lungs and love yourself.
The Interheart study assessed the importance of risk factors for coronary artery disease worldwide. 9 mature and potentially modifiable risk factors accounted for more than 90% of the proportion of the risk for acute myocardial infarction. Smoking, history of hypertension or diabetes, waist-hip ratio, dietary pattern, physical activity, alcohol consumption, blood apolipoproteins, and psychosocial factors were identified as the key risk factors. The effect of these risk factors was consistent in men and women across different geographic regions and by ethnic group. The British Regional Heart Study also found that smoking, blood pressure, and cholesterol accounted for 90% of attributable risk of CHD. Worldwide, the two most important modifiable cardiovascular risk factors are smoking and abnormal lipids. Hypertension, diabetics, psychosocial factors, and abdominal obesity are the next most important, but their relative effects vary in different regions of the world. Most cardiovascular deaths will occur in individuals at moderate risk as they constitute the largest group. High-risk individuals will have the most to gain from risk factor modification and historically are given the highest priority in clinical practice. When estimating risk, total CVD mortality rather than CHD endpoints should be used to encompass stroke prevention as well as CHD prevention. Stroke deaths are underestimated using traditional CHD endpoints. Current risk prediction systems do not predict accurately the different risk profiles that exist in different ethnic groupings and cultures. A risk score derived from Caucasian cohorts may substantially over-predict the risk in the Chinese population. CVD risk prediction based on absolute risk is now advocated for treatment decision for aspirin, statins, and antihypertensive, and in people with atrial fibrillation for warfarin. Chronic cough and chronic bronchitis, cough with phlegm, is a significant risk factor for COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, in later life, she said. Meanwhile, further research is needed to test whether secondhand smoke as a child die in middle age than those who smoke. When we talk about diseases of the respiratory tract, we are talking from the common cold until the pneumonia. The infections such as influenza, for example, are caused some by viruses and other by bacteria that are generally in the environment and are infected with ease. In all cases, the measures preventing more common against diseases of the airways are generally the same. Prevention of the respiratory diseases. Prevent colds and sudden changes in temperature. Consume fruits of the season and food supplements containing vitamin C. Avoid walking barefoot in cold surfaces, since the colds of back, chest, and feet increases the likelihood of develop a cough, cold, or respiratory diseases more complex. Take hygiene habits constant as the cleanliness of your environment, washing constant, and awareness of your hands before eating. Then go to the bathroom after use objects in common use and shared as telephones, pens, and etc. before and after salute of hand, kiss or hug. Never touch your face with the dirty hands, especially eyes, nose, and mouth. Never cover your mouth with hands, and if you do, wash immediately. Do not smoke and avoid being close to people who do. Jab box health info recommendation. Regularly visit the doctor and tell them for what you're feeling in these days. Let a doctor determine the type of illness and treatment, as the diseases of the airways can have severe complications reaching even if not treated properly. Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. The cardiovascular system is the simplest form, a system that consists of a pump, pipes, and a fluid system. Cardiac output is the amount of blood ejected per minute by the heart. The heart is a pump, a 4-chamber duplex pump. The cardiovascular system includes the heart and 2 networks of blood vessels: pulmonary circulation, which moves deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs and returns oxygenated blood back to the heart. Arteries carry oxygen-rich blood away from your heart, and veins carry oxygen-poor blood back to your heart. The vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood are colored red, and the vessels that carry oxygen-poor blood are colored blue. The Inter-Heart study assessed the importance of risk factors for coronary artery disease worldwide. 9 measured and potentially modifiable risk factors accounted for more than 90% of the proportion of the risk for acute myocardial infarction.